We're going to give you last week's news today.
That's a slogan. We should put that in a t-shirt. Last week's news today.
Hi, I'm Andy.
And I'm Roger.
And welcome to The Middle,
where we try to have thoughtful conversations
about awkward topics
on our search to find the middle.
That's fatphobic.
I don't feel war. I just own halfway to Siwa.
A few moments ago, Buckingham Palace announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
I act as if God exists.
Put your masks on.
How dare you? You have stolen my dreams, my childhood, with your empty words.
Andy, how you doing?
Yeah, still getting over post-holiday blues. How about yourself?
Oh, man, yeah, my post-holiday blues was severe because I came straight back into the madness of the kids and everything, and then the last week's school holidays, so it was really tough for me. And then I got sick again, and I'm still getting over cold, so apologies for my nasal voice. But yeah, I feel like with 3 kids, you're just always sick. And yeah.
But don't you like this classic sort of panacea to post-holiday blues is to start like booking your next holiday? So have you given any thought to that?
Oh, there's quite a few things coming up, but obviously we have the complications of trying to work out the schedules with the kids and things like that. So nothing's concrete just yet, really. We're just finding our feet. I'm actually not someone who plans their next holiday like while they're still on the trip or shortly after. I'm not that kind of guy. I know a lot of people are, but I'm also a big hobby guy. Like I like having all my shit, and home is where all that stuff is. So actually I do love also being at home because I feel like I have, we've got the show, we've got my hobbies, I've got my gear, my stuff, I like it. And so I am quite attached to being home as well.
But that's a problem when your hobby is traveling.
yeah, that's true.
So I got back and my first day back at work, I got in the lift, and you know how sometimes in lifts, particularly in like corporate buildings, they have those little TVs with their advertising various things. And the very first ad when I get in the lift is like Malaysian Airlines trying to sell like business class tickets because they've got a business class ticket sale. I'm like, oh,
They've got you while you're weak and you're vulnerable.
Yeah. No, I'll just bury my head in the sand on that one.
Was it weird, like the doors of the lift shutting and then you can see your reflection and you're wearing a suit and you're so used to being
I wasn't wearing a suit. I don't wear suits anymore. Who wears suits anymore? Is that the thing?
I thought you did wear a bit of a...
Nah, only to like formal meetings. But now like there virtually aren't any formal meetings. I don't know.
Well, hit me. What do you actually wear?
Uniqlo sell these like fairly cheap and comfortable. They're like suit pants, but they're just cheap. I don't know. They're like $40 each. And I said to my wife...
You shouldn't be describing the clothes by calling them cheap, by the way. Like, try to...
Well, no, but like the price is relevant. Just coming off our cheapskate episode especially, I said to my wife, it would be more expensive to dry clean these. So I'll just, every time I need a new... Like, instead of like dry cleaning them, I'll just like throw them away and buy a new pair.
That is gold, yeah. Peter,
sorry, I do wear more than pants. I wear a business shirt. And
like you're wearing a suit by another name.
No, but... So just basically no suit jacket, and I do the Dan Andrews Premier Victoria like vest thing, like when it's cold.
The North Face puffer vest.
Yeah, and look, I think the reason I like it is because it's got like lots of pockets, so I can, and zip pockets, so I can put all my stuff in that, and if I need to go out and it's not too hot, I actually have like a suit jacket in the office, so if I really absolutely need it, I can don it and do whatever like. But come on, like 99% of the time in the office, you don't like, no one's expecting you to wear the double-breasted suit and the tie, and that's a thing of the past, surely.
So the reason I asked that in jest is that I got it really wrong, right? When I went, because as you know, I don't go into the office much. And when I went in a year ago and it was still very much a work-from-home culture, people were very, very casual. I'm talking jeans, shirt, jumper, that kind of thing, like super casual. And I thought it was still like that when I went back in a while ago. And so I rocked up in khakis and a t-shirt and like a leather jacket. I think I was even carrying a skateboard at the time. And I showed up to like my office and everyone was in fairly smart casual, probably like 50% suits with no tie and 50% smart casual. So things you're talking about, tucked in dress shirt with like chinos or something like that and casual shoes or whatever. And I just felt so self-conscious. And it's a horrible feeling being really underdressed, I think, much worse than being overdressed because it's turned back now. I think people like getting dressed up because it's a bit of a novelty. It makes them feel good, makes them feel professional again. So I think I had that experience as well.
But see, like I'm just picturing you in your leather jacket and just thinking, oh, you're crafting your image as like
Malcolm Turnbull,
like the guy who like doesn't care, like is so valuable to the organization that you can do whatever the fuck you like. And it reminds me of when I was a graduate, however many years ago, there was this guy. He was like fairly senior, but he was sort of near enough to retirement that he just didn't give a fuck. And we had this meeting with a minister, right? So it's if there's ever a setting you need to like dress up and look the part, that's the setting, right?
Out comes the clip-on tie.
So it's worse. This guy like rocks up to that meeting in his Lycra bicycle gear. Like he can't even be
with the cleats. Tell me, he still had
with everything. Like, oh my God. Because like he needs to ride his bike home like after the meeting. So this is in Parliament House, yeah, and it just was like, what the fuck. Anyway.
That's amazing. I do like a little bit of, as I'm wearing this T-shirt, Rage Against the Machine, I do a little bit of nonconformity when it comes to that kind of stuff because it's harmless. It's a way of people pushing back but expressing themselves, but is ultimately harmless to people. And I like that kind of disobedience sometimes. But yeah, I just think that dressing up does have an effect on you more than people realize. And I think working at home and what COVID has done has made people understand the importance of clothes a little bit more. That when you dress really poorly and really sloppy, you become like you absorb that a little bit. Because I can't tell you how. So to finish that story of coming in the office really underdressed in jeans and a leather jacket and a skateboard, the next day I doubled down and I went to full suit mode. And I cannot tell you how different people treat you when you were carrying a skateboard and just like jeans and stuff versus how you are when you're in a suit. Like literally people look at you as disgust when you carry the skateboard. You know, you're like this pest, and sometimes you are. And then when you're in a suit, people just give you so much more respect, and they just start from such a higher base when they're dealing with you and they know nothing about you. Clothes do make a difference, and they change the way you act as well.
This is just an extension of the coming to the office thing that we've had some earlier debates on. It's that whole you're a different person, right? When you're in the office, you're respected more because you rock up. And
I'm wearing pants.
Like working from home, I was thinking to myself, like probably before going on holidays, but even this week, just part of me just wants to go back and work in the office like full time again, just because I still work a couple of days from home. Just because those 2 days at home, I feel like internally, like I don't feel myself. And I'm probably doing in some ways more work than I do in the office because like I've got more free, like just quiet time to get on with stuff. But I don't know. It's just,
What about, can I ask you, Andy, as an extension to this work from home thing, you've been traveling for quite some time now, and you've still been, editing your videos and doing other things. What do you think about the dream of working as you travel, like remotely anywhere from the world? Do you think you could pull it off?
Not in an actual job. I think that would become too problematic because like when you're working in a job, like that's not like something you do on the side while you're like sipping cocktails in, insert like beautiful beachside location.
Yeah.
That's like 8 hours or more, or even usually like longer of solid work. And like in some ways, if you had to work your solid input that you would to a full-time job in a location where all you want to do is go out and explore and take advantage, like that would almost make it even worse because it's so close yet so far. But like, I think if you could swing something where you almost were like a pretty capable, competent sort of consultant and you could just do your like bite-sized freelance sort of 15, 20 hours a week of work and do all right out of that bite-sized sort of amount of input and then have 4 days a week, for example, in whatever location, that would be pretty cool. But I'm not sure it's that easy.
But do you know what I saw the other day? I was in the toilet. Sorry, I was on the store and then someone walked past me and then we went to the sinks. And he had blue surgical gloves on and he washed his hands over the top of them. Like he didn't take it off. And he like washed like with soap and shit. And I thought, this is bizarre, right? But also...
Did he take the gloves off afterwards?
No. And then he dried them and left. Like they were his hands, right? And part of me was like... just what scenario is happening here? This is not a reusable item. And it really made me freaked out. Like I almost wanted to follow him because is he like working in a food setting or what is it he did? He wasn't a cleaner or anything like that. Then I'm like, oh, maybe he's got some kind of skin condition or whatever. It's like, no, you just replace the gloves, wouldn't you? I don't know. It actually freaked me out. It wasn't as humorous as I thought it would be.
My toilet stall story is when we were away, we were checked out of the hotel, but my son needed to go to the toilet, so I escorted him to the bathroom. And my son's in the toilet stall, but then like this other guy rocks up there's only 2 stalls in the bathroom.
Yeah.
And this other guy rocks up to the next one and then starts making like all these sounds like, and just like it all like lets it rip and just everything comes out. But it's this guy's been holding it in for 3 years or something and it just lets it out all in one go.
Finally finished that first date.
But the funniest thing is my son couldn't hold his laughter in. He just starts laughing. But that kind of and it was just so. It
Just goes to show, man, like it doesn't matter how old you get, it's still funny. Yeah. All right. What are we talking about today?
So we've both been on these like holidays. We did have a pipeline of episodes. And so the thing about having a pipeline of episodes is that if you record an episode and release it 6 weeks later, you have no capacity to comment on anything contemporary, right? So there's no point about like talking about what's happening in the news this week or today or whatever, because in 6 weeks' time, it's not relevant. Everyone's forgotten about it. Circumstances have changed, right? So we basically don't have a pipeline of episodes. So we thought we'd try something a little bit different, which is to comment on some contemporary developments, news, articles, but just to comment on some more contemporary topics or issues. So we're going to run through a few, just like a grab bag today, and see where it takes us as a bit of a experiment.
Yeah, that's right. 24-hour news cycle, eat your heart out. We're coming for you, Charlie. All right, where do we want to start?
Maybe we should signpost that today is the 28th of July, right?
Yeah.
28th of July. So this episode probably will be released a week after we record it. So we'll just flag that for anyone listening wondering why we're talking about something that has changed in the days since we've recorded it. But we thought we would start with Kevin Spacey. So I'm going to start with a question. How did you feel when Kevin Spacey was dropped from House of Cards because of the allegations of what were like sexual abuse, basically?
I think it's more that, well, number one, right, is whether you can separate the man from the art. And when it comes to something like a TV series, I think that an audience has the right to be selfish and want closure after 5 seasons or whatever it is. And the second is, I do believe that you should be innocent until proven guilty at its heart, right? And that's the problem I kind of have with when networks start to distance themselves from bad press before there's actually even a ruling or all the facts are out there. They're just like, oh, there's some mud on this person. We're not really interested in seeing it through. And to me, that's like a little bit of bad faith. I don't know. How do you feel about it?
Well, and of course, that's like relevant in this situation because even if the court of public opinion is different to a court of law, but a court of law found him innocent of his charges.
Yeah.
So he is essentially an innocent man. I'm actually not sure if, we haven't done a lot of background research here, but I'm not actually sure if he's got any other charges or out-of-court settlements or like civil cases in other jurisdictions. But look, I think there's a lot of smoke right around Kevin Spacey. So I don't think whatever this court ruling in the UK sort of says about those specific cases, I still think there's a lot of smoke, and I doubt the court of public opinion is clean now. But to the actual question of like House of Cards, if it wasn't already such a car wreck of a TV show by the time they dropped him, because like, let's face it, like House of Cards was great the first season, second season, and maybe, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 after, but by the end it was like jump the shark. So yeah. By that time, I didn't care anyway. I probably even stopped watching it because it was just getting a bit ridiculous. So I didn't care that much. But at like a principle level, I totally agree. It's sort of like, can you enjoy Michael Jackson music anymore? Of course you can. If you enjoy the art, why does any other factor affect your enjoyment of something like that? So yeah, completely agree.
It is tough though, isn't it? It's like Michael Jackson's a really good one because I love his music. Like literally changed my life, right? When I first heard it, I was like, man, this music is incredible when I discovered it. And now it does take that edge off it, right? And not so much that you can still enjoy it, but like to say I'm a big Michael Jackson fan, right? If you are one, is a bit of a risky move nowadays. And I think, okay, let's take something that's like a little bit less universally loved, like maybe for our generation, like a Bill Cosby. Like you wouldn't really want to be having like fandom, right?
He's innocent, I swear. It was consensual.
Having like Bill Cosby, memorabilia or something like that, you wouldn't really like work that into the conversation, right? Or put that on your dating profile. So it's very hard to know the truth on these matters. And I think at a principles basis, can you separate the man or woman from the art.
So I think like another relevant question here is some of these, like within Kevin Spacey's instance, some of the charges related to historical offences or things that happened, decades ago. And that gets a little bit tricky too, because now we've talked before about judging people by standards of the time and all that sort of stuff. And I don't know, there's some pretty high profile examples of famous rock stars having it on with very underage girls, and that kind of everyone just forgets about that or sweeps that under the carpet. And that it's like known and public. Like, like the famous ones would be like people like Mick Jagger and stuff like that. But then there's like even Anthony Kiedis from Red Hot Chili Peppers. There's heaps of these. It was all over the place at that time. There's these blurring of lines of this is very clearly inappropriate and wrong and whatever, but like in their minds at that time it wasn't, and that, or at least it was a bit more grey than it is now. And I think that's the other thing that makes it, it doesn't make it right or acceptable or allowable, but it just makes it more complicated and less black and white.
I'll throw something a bit more controversial in there while we're on the topic, Andy. So the allegations are also of a homosexual orientation. Now, post our gay episode, would it be right that you believe that there are meaningful differences between heterosexual and gay relationships and the dynamics that form between them?
I mean, that was very clearly the message that we were, I think, given, right?
Well, yeah. So I guess I'll be the one to say it because I brought it up. I think that I do look at the allegations slightly differently because it's a man-on-man thing. I'm not saying that there's maybe I am saying that there might be a different benchmark for what constitutes harassment in that world from what I've heard. And maybe that is problematic, but it's something that's in the back of my mind that I haven't resolved as well.
I don't think this is quite down the path you're going, but I just watched on Netflix, there's a bio documentary of Wham, and it's not a George Michael biopic or anything like that, but it's obviously he's a big part of Wham, so he features fairly prominently. First of all, just as an aside, I have no idea how anyone could have thought he was a straight guy, like at any point of his tenure in Wham. But just to put that to one side, it got me down the Wikipedia rabbit warren and all that sort of stuff. And it's like, when did he come out and stuff? And he came out in as late as 98, which I was quite surprised because surely like everyone knew he was gay by that time. No. And I think the public consciousness was, this is not a secret or a surprise, but he came out but the reason he came out was because it was after he was arrested in Beverly Hills for public indecency or whatever. And it just, even back like 98, which I still see as close enough to contemporary history that it quite shocked me that it was quite targeted, like in probably a homophobic sort of way, right? Where they arrested him for the toilet block sort of thing. And he made some comments about the police officer where I think there was like a film clip or something where he made fun of the incident and made fun of the police officer and how like this is like your job, like to go and like lure on the grounds of like a consensual sort of act, like almost like saying, hey, you need to look in the mirror, like who's done the wrong thing here? Is it me?
Yeah,
who's
or
like
you pretending to...
Yeah, exactly. And but the cop went and sued George Michael for like offense. Like, I don't know on what grounds, but because apparently he took offense at this. And it's like, in my mind, I'm just picturing this is just like a vendetta against gay people, essentially. Yeah. Like, how dare you be like gay and proud and confident, basically. And anyway, sorry, I know that's a different angle to where you're going with it, but it's very complicated, right?
To say the least. But on that point about not knowing, like, how could you not know he was gay? I think you'd be surprised, like, what people do believe. Like, I remember, when did Ricky Martin come out as gay? Very recently, right? In the last 5-10 years? Okay, so I've looked it up just to get this right. In a statement, Ricky Martin calls himself a fortunate homosexual man, March 29, 2010. 2010. So still quite recent, I think. And I remember, like, before that, I think maybe in the mid-2000s, I was having a conversation with someone and I said, Ricky Martin is 100% gay. Look at it. And I remember having this conversation with this group of people and they're like, no, you're mistaking like the Latin flair for being gay. You're homophobic. And I'm like, he's definitely gay. It's clear after the fact. It's not so clear when you're in the moment because it is hard to tell someone's orientation when it comes down to it. I
still maintain that Freddie Mercury was straight. I think as well, George Michael probably established that flamboyant sort of style of, music
campness
and performance as that became a gay sort of thing. Like,
the
and it
80s
wasn't
were more
necessarily
camp, right? The 80s had more flair.
Yeah. This might be a bit too niche for many of our listeners to know, but Tina Turner, so anyone who doesn't follow or know anything about rugby league here in Australia, Simply the Best.
Oh,
Her song, that was like the most like the best anthem for rugby league that they've ever had, and it was like anyway, this big thing.
I still remember the montage with the hits of the tackle. Like,
oh yeah,
timed perfectly to her song.
It was, I don't know, just like the two went hand in hand, right? Especially growing up, like associated the two together. Anyway, but that's not the story. But the story is she's performing Simply the Best at this grand final, and there's the really key sort of saxophone part of that song, and this guy shirtless, he's got like his abs showing, he's got this ponytail, and he's all oiled up, and he's got this sax, and he's playing it like he's making love to it. It's just the most I'm just going to say it this way because I don't know how it's just the most gay thing you've ever seen in your life. But I still think that was still like no one thought of that as gay back then. That was just like a hot guy or something.
Yeah,
we'll add it to
it's just a hot hairless
shorts.
hairless saxophone player that likes to take care of himself. Yeah, I think people just make all sorts of reasons and rationalize in their head. So I actually am not surprised at anything anymore when it comes to that stuff. There were people who didn't think Liberace was gay.
No, don't be silly. Back to Kevin Spacey. So do you think he will come back from this back to Hollywood? Do you think he'll be what was the dude who played the wrestler?
Oh yeah.
Do you think he'll have his like, what was that guy's name again?
We got to get this right. Mickey Rourke.
Mickey Rourke. Do you think he'll have his Mickey Rourke moment and come back as and win an Oscar or something like that?
My gut feel is no. And that's because that someone like Mickey Rourke represents a very different community, different vibe, different people. At the end of the day, Kevin Spacey is still very much in that ultra liberal arts space, right? Playwrights and theater and gay things. Like, it's not, I just don't think you can come back to that audience. And for the rest of us that are wanting to watch House of Cards and stuff, unfortunately, the notoriety from all this stuff is going to overtake any role that he's going to do next. So I just think it's going to be a distraction to his art, and the fewer opportunities that he will have to do things will be boycotted by the liberal arts community, personally.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think he's not a young man either. So if he's going to come back, I think there still needs to be like a passage of time that everyone's forgotten and doesn't care anymore, and maybe even takes joy out of like the return. And I don't know that there's enough time in his sort of his effective working life to
he'll be behind the scenes, right? And which he already does with his theatre work and the old Vic. But I also think that what's working against Kevin Spacey is that a lot of his roles he plays a really Machiavellian psychopath. So you've already got that image in your head that this guy has the capacity for violence and like just this evil kind of attitude. So I think that's where people will look at that and they go, oh, look, it's art imitating life. It'd be very different if he played a very different character set. But he portrays that character so well that I think people almost believe it, that he's already guilty.
Yep. All right. I think we should move on to our next mini topic. You added this one to the list. I don't know much about it, so I might hand over to you to tell us about the Elon and Mark Zuckerberg fight.
Sign of the times. Sign of the end times. So we have two very public figures, billionaires. Elon Musk being, I think he is the richest man in the world at the moment. Well, if you don't count all the secret money of the Saudis and all that business. And Mark Zuckerberg, so the creator of Facebook, wanting to fight a UFC fight together.
Oh.
Apparently very, very serious discussions with Dana White, the president of the UFC. Both seem to be very serious about this fight.
So has this been triggered from like a fundamental disagreement about something, and then this is like the equivalent of the 18th century duel, or what?
There's not some kind of I demand satisfaction, or there's been some disrespect or whatever it is. It seems to be just this weird carnival thing, or like what from Elon lately, which is a random tweet. I don't think you can call it tweets anymore, but we'll get to that. And yeah, Mark Zuckerberg has really shown an interest in UFC and mixed martial arts rather of late. For the last couple of years, he's been training with some of the best in the business and really embracing it as a bit of a hobby. So he's had this kind of passion, and when he's gone on he's been brushing shoulders with Joe Rogan and stuff in his podcast, he's been talking about how he's been training and he's found a real love for the sport. I don't know if it's come from that or Elon's just crazy or he's just an entertainer at heart. I don't know.
Elon, I think, would do it just because, right? If you'd asked me like who would win and you didn't tell me that last bit about Mark Zuckerberg trading, I'd be like, oh, fucking Elon's going to flatten him. So maybe there's some like tactics or strategy that he'll have. But it does remind me of like some of the theatre that you'd have from all those 80s rock stars, where they'd challenge, like the front man from one band would challenge like another front man from another band to have a fight and like to have it in public, and we'll sell tickets in Vegas. But the thing is, like, none of them are ever serious. They never do it. They all wuss out, talk big, but never go ahead with it.
Online, there's been all sorts of famous fighters gravitating to each camp, saying that they're willing to like train them or prepare them for the match. Now,
is this okay? So these people have everything like available to them. They're billionaires. They're almost bored, really. And so it's if you can have everything you could possibly want, like what do you start going for? You go for the things you currently don't have or can't have. And so it's like this. It's this, okay, like I'm jealous of Logan Paul or whatever, so I need to have this other thing like on my belt.
Probably. It's probably like that bored billionaire thing, right? There's only so many Bugattis you can buy until you probably get into a bit of a dark rabbit hole, and the next thing you know, you're hunting man, right? In some private island somewhere. The ultimate hunt.
So Andrew Tate, right? He was the UFC, right? Was he?
No, he was a kickboxer.
But don't they all do the same thing? Isn't it all combined? Like MMC or MMA?
MMA is like a multidiscipline thing, right? So you can inside the cage.
Know what I'm talking about.
Inside the octagon, you can kind of essentially use whatever you want, and there are basic rules like no groin shots, no eye gouging, no elbows directly to the skull, kind of thing, like from upward position, things like that. They have all these rules, but within those rules, you can use whatever techniques you want, which is the point, right? What they've found over time is that certain disciplines do better than others, and you need like a rounding in a lot of different things. So that's what mixed martial arts is, which is that's what the UFC is, right? Something like, then you still have pure disciplines like boxing, obviously no kicks and all this kind of stuff, and then kickboxing, which you can kick, but you can't choke people and stuff like that. So it's one of those things.
I guess the other thing is, as I mentioned before, Logan Paul, right? So he was like a YouTuber, or I can't remember what else he did, but anyway, I think predominantly just did YouTube videos. Like, I'm not sure what his YouTube channel had, but like he's the guy behind Prime energy drinks.
Yeah, I think it's a joint venture with KSI and Logan Paul.
Right, but he's now done all these fights, and I don't know, I think actually like he's the real deal, as in he's not like the best fighter ever, but like he's competitive, and a lot of people said, oh, who's this like clown trying to be it's actually dangerous for him or whatever, but it actually turns out he's actually an athlete. So it's this new like modern trend of like people with money and resources entering into,
isn't it? Doesn't for me all roads lead back to Fight Club, because it's that same thing of like when you don't have meaning in your life or your office work or whatever it is, actually getting in a fight is like probably the one experience that you haven't had, and that actually teaches you so many things. Now it's not the same, right, being in a real life fight, but I do remember when I picked up boxing, right, the first time that you spar with someone, it is a bit of a real life altering or like perception altering experience, because you just don't face that in civilized society, right? Or hopefully you don't. And just putting yourself in that mindset is actually incredibly exciting, incredibly humbling, and it just changes your view on things. So I'm actually not that surprised that these people who are overachievers, billionaires, all that kind of gravitate towards these sports, right? Because really it's how they get their thrills and change their perspective. And they probably need it in their lives.
Bill Gates just turns to trying to help starving people in Africa, but
yeah, that's all right too. The two are not mutually exclusive. He's probably got a dojo somewhere. But anyway, going back to the matchup, right? So you've got the situation where Mark Zuckerberg is, I think he's 40 or even younger. Elon's 52, I believe. Elon's 6'2", Mark Zuckerberg is 5'7". So you've got this really interesting combination. It's like a little pocket rocket who's been training versus someone who's built like a 1950s fridge but is older and hasn't been training. And who are you going to pick? You're going to pick the bear to maul the terrier, even though it's trained? It's just an interesting thing. It's like a little fantasy matchup that breaks all the rules, right? Very entertaining.
I could foresee like Elon Musk dying of a heart attack. Like that is on the table.
You do know Elon Musk is one of the inspirations for Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man, because if he gets a heart attack and then he has to get one of those little magnets in his chest, he will become Iron Man.
I wonder if Twitter shares will go up if Elon Musk has a heart attack.
Well, this is getting dark. This is getting dark.
All right, I think that's a good segue to the other piece of news that came out this week, which was the rebrand of Twitter. What do you think about X, the new name, or the new logo at least? I don't know. Is it actually called X now, or is it Twitter but the logo is X?
It's hard to understand really what's going on, which I think is also the issue with anything that Elon does with Twitter. Like, obviously the corporation...
Is it called Twitter though still, or is it now called X?
I don't know officially, but the corporation that acquired it is like X, right? So I think it's being absorbed into a parent brand.
No, but if you go to the Twitter website, like the logo is now X. Hang on, I'm just going now to it. Yeah, it's like X is like all over the shop.
The app icon is still a bird on my phone. And all the alerts are.
So I've just like on, web page type twitter.com. So that's still the URL. And it says sign in to Twitter. So it still says Twitter. But the bird's gone and it says it's got that X, right?
Yeah. And I think this is one of the feedback that they're writing about that is really haphazard, right? So I've just opened Twitter on my iPhone and it's still the bird. There's no X. And all my alerts are that. You see it everywhere. So I think you're going to see both. Now, he did say that we'll phase out the bird over time.
Are they going to? Is it going to be called a tweet, or is it going to be called
like the bird's gone?
X?
The bird's gone, right? But I just don't understand to sacrifice so much of your brand. And like when you think about it, what is Twitter? It's not really anything that can't be achieved by other platforms. So if you get rid of the brand completely, it just seems like it's one of those situations where it's like, does Elon know something that we don't? Like, is this a genius move? Because it sounds very stupid to kind of ruin a brand. I'm not sure
that's quite right. A lot of the commentary said, oh, why would you spend however many billions on this thing? And then the only thing it's worth is really its brand. And then you get rid of the brand. So what have you bought? And viewers, I don't think it's strictly true that, in fact, I would argue against the notion that he just bought a brand, right? He bought a platform that has millions and millions or billions even, I don't know how many people are on Twitter, but like of users. And you can't just recreate that, right? You can't just set up some new thing called X and have that many users. So and for better or worse, if you call it, you could call it anything, right? You could call it shit sandwich, right? And there would still be millions and millions of people using it. Like existing Twitter users would still use it. So it's the network effect of other users on the platform that basically means that it's very hard for a new entrant to just come and disrupt that.
Shit sandwich, Yeah. So then instead of a cable, it'd be like a dump. And
that's right.
Instead of a tweet, it would be like a fart or something.
A twat.
Yeah, but you do know what I mean though, right? Losing the Twitter brand when it's so iconic and doing it this way with such blatant disrespect.
Maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's like, this world of like old is gone and like I'm here we're making a break.
One position I know that's floating out there is that things are really bad, worse than you think. And so this is like a Hail Mary pass to actually rebrand the dog food company, like to kind of change the name, see if they can get a fresh start and get it right.
The other proposition that I read was that like the grand plan for Elon Musk in acquiring Twitter isn't to own Twitter as it currently is. It's to grow it and change it and turn it into essentially like a new digital commerce platform, right? And equivalent to some of the platforms in China, I think Weibo is an example where it's like this chat thing, but it's also like e-commerce is like you do your payments through the system or whatever as well. And that's actually like the way to monetize it and commercialize it. And that's actually the goal. And part of the thinking is that if you want to start doing things like that on Twitter and you've got this cute little bird that you tweet, that goes tweet, and it doesn't conjure up the kind of image of trust and maybe people are looking for if they start making financial transactions through the platform.
I'm not sure an X, just a random X with no text does that either though.
Well, maybe he's trying to corner the OnlyFans and, kind of seedy underground of the internet market. I'm not sure.
Look, that could all be right. But at the end of the day, I equally think it's possible for someone like Elon to be like, look, I'm just an engineer. I've got a funny side to me and I spent $43 billion so I can tweet whatever the fuck I want because it's funny to me.
But see, just as an aside, all of the armchair critics criticizing Elon Musk, right, and all of his decisions and like people, and these are like usually they're like millennials that can't even get into the housing market, can't get their own finances and their own careers and all that in order, and like critiquing Elon Musk, who's the richest person on the planet, for his business decisions. Come on, like this is a very smart guy. Like even if he is just doing it for shits and giggles, I would still like the probability that there's some genius behind this.
And I acknowledge that. Like I said, maybe he's got a move that we don't know and we're just not on the level. But what I would say, and I'm a fan of Elon, but not for conventional reasons. But what I would say is that intelligence has rather disappointingly less real world application than you think. So even if he is a genius, but
he is the richest man on the planet, right? So he's got some other magic ingredients other than intelligence, right?
Yeah, no, I got you. And second, probably more importantly, he is a man. He's one man who has 24 hours a day. He has 5 incredibly demanding companies, if not more. How, and you just know this, like, how can you possibly dedicate yourself enough to run this properly? And that's the part that kind of, to me, worries me. That there's just way too much stuff there. He's just one man.
Yeah. So I think the whole Twitter thing, right, when he bought it, I feel like that had to be the part of his psyche that was just like, this is just for fun, right? Yeah. I've got my other businesses where
I've already proven myself.
This is where my value and my wealth is to be stored. But like, I kind of have so much money. I don't know how many billions he's worth, but it's a lot.
Yeah, this is his project car, his classic car that he's always wanted.
Let's just say, like, as a general principle, if you have $1 billion, you can pretty much, you don't need another $1 billion, right? The value of an extra $1 billion once you've already got $1 billion is virtually zero. It doesn't bring you any extra benefit in your life.
Inflation? Right? 1 billion wasn't what it used to be.
So if you're worth 60 or 100 or 150 or however many he's worth, right? And you just, fuck it. Like, I'll buy Twitter. I'll have some fun with that. And I can see that being the thing. Anyway.
Yeah, I can see it too. But yeah, look, I fully admit that we probably don't see the angles to this. And I think Elon is a character who revels in the mystery, the mystique, and the entertainment. Like, he has that thing when he was asked about the fight with Zuckerberg, and they asked him, is this really going to happen, and all this kind of stuff. And he said something really cool, which was pretty much, obviously not verbatim, but the most likely outcome is often the most entertaining one. And so he gets it. He understands, like, the pull of modern society and capitalism and how to do it right. He understands that really fundamental truth that people just want entertainment. And so he kind of gets that right.
Let's see what happens down the pipeline.
I have to give it to one of the best. You know how news articles have those little banners down the bottom? I have to give it to one of the best for that particular story of Twitter rebranding to X. And the banner down the bottom of the news story said, X gonna give it to you. And I thought that was a genius. So DMX song, if anyone's wondering.
All right. So 28th of July, yesterday, we woke up to the death of Sinead O'Connor. Did you have, was she someone that you had paid attention to in her career or that had been in your consciousness in any significant way prior to yesterday?
So I always had problems pronouncing her first name, so that was always awkward for me. No, I was a very big fan of, obviously, her vocal talent. And I know it's cheesy, but I do really love, like, it's actually one of my favorite songs in the world is Nothing Compares to You. And I loved it so much that when Chris Cornell, rest in peace, covered it live with strings, that then became one of my favorite songs ever and still is to this day.
Although it is a Prince song.
Yeah, I know. But he covered her style of it.
There's a whole rabbit warren around Hallelujah, the Leonard Cohen song, and then that was made famous by Jeff Buckley, but actually Jeff Buckley was copying the style of this other guy who no one knows about. Anyway, sorry.
But I think when it comes to that, so first of all, I totally acknowledgement that I love that song. And I feel like it's one of those songs that if you were someone who never heard music before, right, came out of a POW camp or whatever, and you heard that song, it would just cut through you like a knife, like really give you a crash course into how beautiful humans are. So I want to get that out of the way. I think that what I did really like from her too is this idea of the way she put in her mental, I think she was one of, maybe not the original, but one of someone who like talked about her mental health a lot. And I quite liked that. So basically she had a diagnosis of bipolar or manic depressive or whatever they called it back then. And she actually spoke about that a lot and raised that through her presence or her platform. Yeah. So those are the parts that I remember. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, she's in some ways, she was as famous for everything she did off the stage as she was on the stage, or figuratively speaking. So I just obviously like the earliest sort of knowledge of her was Like You, Nothing Compares to You, like that's the most famous song, maybe one or two other songs earlier in her career, but then it just seemed like a train wreck, right? This is someone who, okay, she atheist now, now she's converting to Islam, now she's back, now she's a priest, like all that kind of stuff going on, like very
the Catholic Church, right? So there was that famous thing, wasn't there, where she was it the Pope that she taught?
Yeah, so this is the and actually like it's in hindsight, like it's amazing that something like that courted her so much controversy. So, went on Saturday Night Live, performed a song, I think, or maybe anyway, was up to perform and took a picture of Pope John Paul II, who at the time was probably held in a much higher regard than what we would hold a pope today to be, and she ripped it up. And of course she's Irish as well, which then there's that whole if there's a Catholic country, like Ireland usually comes to mind, but this was in the US, and it caused just a lot of controversy. And she was, I think there was then this other sort of piece of the puzzle where the next week Joe Pesci, this little Italian guy, gets up and almost does a counter protest sort of thing. So it's a real reflection of the time. I think that an act of, really, I mean, I think she was protesting a lot of the horrors of the Catholic Church, which many people would be very sympathetic to,
and child abuse,
and that was seen as like, how dare you, question the Catholic Church. So it is a bit of a sign of the times and how much things have changed. I mean, I think actually, ironically, she seems to be quite a religious person, but just not quite sure what she what the faith is. But she just seems to be someone who wants to put faith in something and live her life by a set of religious principles, but struggled with the institutions of religion.
That's a really good way of putting it. All right.
I do just one thing. I mean, obviously it's sad, but one of the other musical sort of contributions that stick with me is Roger Waters performed The Wall in Berlin after the fall of the Berlin Wall. So there's this big concert, and this was a time when it was just Roger Waters because Pink Floyd went together. But he got all these different singers and bands and artists together to do a rendition of The Wall. And she came on and sang Mother with Roger Waters. And it's quite a, it's, I don't know if we can somehow play it, but it's, it's definitely, one of the best.
What we'll do is in the show notes, we'll link Nothing Compares, for people, and God, if you haven't listened to that song before, this is our gift to you. And we'll do the Chris Cornell version, and maybe if we can find the Mother recording as well, we'll link that in as a bit of a tribute there. So on a brighter note, should we shake it off? I do stay out too late. It's one of my main problems.
Did you get your Taylor Swift tickets?
1989. The Taylor Swift's actually not that much younger than we are.
4 years.
Yeah. That makes me feel better because Taylor Swift's kind of like forever young.
Actually, Miley Cyrus is another one where you have to get your head around that she's not a Disney teen starlet anymore. Like she's like a 33-year-old woman, or however old she is.
I feel like that the same thing that's similar to that for me is Lizzie McGuire. Like I always feel like, but really she's our age, right? Sorry, Hillary Duff, not Lizzie McGuire.
So Taylor Swift, she does seem to be having like her moment now, right? Like where she's always been like for even 15, 20 years, I'm not sure when she started a career, but certainly at least the last 10 years, has been very much a famous singer-songwriter who could fill very large venues for at least a decade or more. But now seems to be like the very peak where it's the real deal. Like it's not just filling like a stadium, it's like filling a stadium multiple nights and still everyone fighting over the tickets. And it's when you think of like rock bands that used to fill out stadiums, and that would like a big stadium show or whatever. I always think the Elton John sort of at in Chicago, like, that big stadium show. She does this like multiple nights. Like she's playing to 500,000 people.
I don't understand the numbers.
In a week, right?
It's like really, like the numbers blow my mind. They really do, because when you look at it also in terms of finances, I have this thing in my head that it's like finance industry money figures. It's not like people handing over ticket money at the door. Like she's making $19 million a night. how does that even work? So her current tour predicted that it's going to gross $1 billion. $1 billion. How is that even possible?
But she's on her own as well, right? There's no like other bandmates to share it with. This is just all to her, right? That's serious going.
I can't even imagine the numbers that drive that.
But it's so okay, so like who else nowadays would be in her kind of league, right? And you know, I sort of think maybe a few years ago people would talk about her in this like Beyonce in kind of the same way, and you know, maybe like Ed Sheeran as well. But she's bigger. Like she's like maybe Adele as well. I'm not sure, but yeah, she's a league of her own, I think.
Yeah, maybe like I don't know. Her contemporaries are at the moment Justin Bieber.
Nah, he's
Guns N' Roses probably.
No.
Don't they hold one of the records for the highest earning tours?
That's because like they toured for like 10 years straight or something, right? It's not. I'm not sure what the price of her tickets are. Maybe there's like a price element. Like, so you get some of these legacy acts that, you know, it's like $400 a ticket. That's to get in the door at the shitty seat that you can't see anything. Maybe for her, but I think that they're not cheap either. Like her tickets, like this. But she is just huge. Maybe to take a step back, forget the tour for a sec. What's your view of Taylor Swift? Because she's quite like a divisive. People love her or hate her. That's the sense I get.
Yeah, I think so. She brings out a feeling in people where if they are sensitive to feminist adjacent elements, they can turn on her quite quickly. And I think it's because she sings about that stuff, right? She makes it a little bit more front and center in her work. But for me, it's just not. Like, her music is not for me. Her hits, her pop hits, I enjoy, but her music's not for me. And I assume you're in the same boat, unless there's something you want to tell me.
I'm probably a little bit more on the amenable to Taylor Swift music than you, by the sounds of it. Like, there's some songs that like get in my head, but like I think when you say the hits, right? That's probably, I don't think there's enough depth in like the album for me to. Oh yeah, I just want to listen to this album, right? Over and over again. And actually did this exercise of while I was away, right? I pulled up like a playlist on Spotify. I pulled up like her set list, the tour set list, like the songs that she would play in a concert. Partially because I was trying to contemplate, is this something I could take like my wife to, or is this like a nice couple's night out to go and see Taylor Swift?
Can you afford it?
Well, can I even get a ticket? That's the first problem. And I listened through the set list and I didn't know like any of the songs because I thought I would, right? I thought this is just the stuff that you hear in shops. Like you can't help but know these songs. And like I knew like, you know, the famous ones or whatever, but I was quite surprised. Like there's a lot in her catalog that I just never heard before. And I didn't necessarily get the sense that, oh yeah, these are great songs. I would keep listening to them, but she is very talented. There's some really great songs that and I understand she writes herself. Like she's, you know, she might have some other songwriters with her or whatever, but she's not just a singer, right? She's a songwriter. Like some of them are really good songs. But the thing that rubs me up, you know, totally with her is that she's such a whiny white girl, right? This is someone who's like, she is successful, she's beautiful, she's got money, she's got famous friends, she can do anything she wants. She can make any decision she wants to make about her career. If she doesn't like touring, if she thinks it's too much, she can stop touring. Like the world is her oysters. She is in the driver's seat, but she just complains nonstop. She complains about being successful. She complains about not having a boyfriend, or just like seriously. Just there are people starving. There are people who can't get jobs. There are people who can't get housing, and you're complaining that like you're too famous. Like fuck off. Anyway,
I think that's the point in her music, though. That's why it has such a connection with young people, because that's them. They feel that. They're like, I don't know why I've got Fight Club stuck in my head, but it's like the disease of the middle class, right? It's like this kind of scourge that you're not special and that you have nothing to complain about, but you're not satisfied. You're not happy. You feel restless. And so I think it's the same thing as like teenage angst songs with emo or grunge, disillusionment. I think it's tapping into that vein of the idle white suburban middle class. Don't you think? Because that's probably how they feel.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I remember 30 years ago, one of the commonalities between, say, rock and roll and hip hop was that the famous rock bands of that era especially the punky ones, like with a punky element, was that like these are people on the street. These are people living it rough. These are people living tough lives. There's a real kind of the culture. These are not the haves. These are the have-nots, right?
Yeah.
People, maybe the masses, the middle class kind of respected that, and that was what they wanted to hear from. And then at some point, like in the last 20 years, everything flipped where it was like the preppy sort of private school kids that were forming bands, and that's when rock lost the plot a bit, and it wasn't. Yeah, there was nothing to admire about it outside.
The authenicity's gone, right?
Yeah, so I think what she can own is like a success story of someone who works hard, who wants like perseveres, and she can own that story. But it's everything is just so depressed. It's like there's nothing in her music, or at least that I'm aware of, that's hey, look, I'm really fucking lucky. I'm really fortunate. It's just all this is just how tough everything is. Come on, like seriously. By the way, I really like her music, so I'm
about to say, for someone who's meant to be defending. Now, yeah, look, I'm more of a Miley guy myself. If I have to pick someone in that category, I'm definitely a Miley man.
So you know how, like, in an episode earlier this year, we were talking about the Spotify, like your like played lists, like the ones like
Spotify Unwrapped, whatever.
Unwrapped, that's right. I'm making a prediction, a hot prediction. The number one for me is going to be this one from Taylor Swift. It's me. Hi, I'm the problem, it's me. And we are now officially banned from Spotify.
We just made her 19.1 million.
You know how she re-recorded all of her songs because some guy bought her back catalogue or something and she wasn't happy with it, so she just...
That's such a gangster move.
Well, it's kind of like, on one hand I respect it, but I
wonder how long it took her though. Doesn't she have like a huge back catalogue? But can you imagine though, like obviously she's got music, right? But if someone turned around to us and said, guys, we need you to record every single podcast episode again because someone has bought your back catalogue, I don't know if we could do it. I literally do not know if we could do it.
You know what we could do? We could get the transcripts and we could get some Audible actor to play ourselves.
Get Kevin Spacey. He's probably looking for work. Anyway, that's good, man. I had fun looking at these news stories. How are you finding, just to wrap this up though, how are you finding you are getting across news nowadays?
Oh, we could have a whole episode on that. But I really...
Because I'm hoping that your answer is much more methodical than mine, but I'm waiting to see.
Okay, I'll say this. I used to enjoy like the news, as in like newspapers, like ABC News, 7:30 Report, all those kind of shows. Now I'm just like, I just turned off it. I don't care. So anyway, in terms of news consumption, like I'm still a little bit addicted to, in the same way as someone would be like checking their social media profile or whatever. So I don't get my news through social media, so just to be clear, but I think I engage with news websites in that way, in that similar way where I'm like, I want the new thing to be added to the homepage, like the news story or the breaking news or whatever. So I read like online news a lot. So definitely read I have probably a couple websites that I would check, but they're local, like Australian based news websites. How about you?
For me, it's very scattered, right? And I think that's the problem for me. I went for a long period of time where I didn't watch TV. Let me clarify that. I didn't watch free-to-air TV, which included the local and Australian news. And so I got all my stuff from online sources. Since the kids have come into the picture, I do have the news on a little bit more. And I must say, I'm starting to get a taste for it again. Just having
what
news.
Bulletin do you watch? Which channel?
It's a mix of like ABC, mainly ABC, I guess.
See, I find ABC, just for anyone outside of Australia, which is like our public broadcaster, really boring. Like just like the free-to-air networks, they really jazz up their bulletins. Like they add in the right mix of puff pieces, like advertorials with like serious news. Like they know how to like, the car chase. Yeah, we got to like, there's good footage here. So we've got to like, even though it's like not important, but it's entertainment, right? It's not actually news. It's just.
But what I was going to say is that I think the gap for me is international news. I don't have a reliable outlet that I have chosen or stuck with to get more international news. I do think it's a bit of a hole, right? And so inevitably you end up getting the really big stuff online. But I do feel I need to have a think about that.
I think though with news, like news is actually bad. Like news is bad for the soul, right? News is just what's the thing that happened today, and almost by definition, it's not important. It's just the thing that happened. But like the things that really are important, like the things that they're not just one single day events, they're more trends, right, over time. So some people might say, for example, climate change, right, as a thing is, or we've had this whole thing about AI, like in this year around ChatGPT and what does that all mean? And these are things which then there's no single news event, right? So news as a vehicle to pay attention to the most important things is actually really quite poor. But if you actually want to learn about those topics and pay attention to the things that matter, I'm like, we're on a podcast here, but I'm a big consumer of podcasts, right?
Yeah.
And that's probably where I would get most of my kind of information on things that are actually important, not just a puppy threw up and on some rich woman's dress in Vaucluse kind of thing.
I agree with you. And I do think there's this phenomenon that happens where news is the news cycle is trying to give you frequent updates. And actually, the longer the updates, the longer the frequency, the longer in between times of checking a particular news topic, the more accurate it will be. So if you're trying to check every day how a certain thing is unfolding, you'd be better off just checking it at the end of the week, so to speak.
So that's what we're trying to do here at the middle, and I think that's a good closing note, is we're going to give you last week's news today.
That's a slogan. We should put that on a T-shirt. Last week's news today.
So it's today, this episode will be released on